So hello, good afternoon, and welcome to session 22 of Talking Asperger's with Andrew. And today we're going to cover quite an interesting topic with regard to people on the spectrum who have Asperger's or autism, and that's meltdowns. I don't know whether you've experienced a meltdown, either been a person who's had one or you've been in a room where someone has had a meltdown. I've had a few from time to time, and it's a complete uncontrollable response to an overwhelming situation, where you just lose the ability to focus and act reasonably and act in a sensible way. You can be very vocal, you can shout, you can get angry, you can swear. Some people get very physical and they can, be very, very angry and want to hit something or someone, which I don't recommend. But people can get really, it is a complete loss of control. It's not a voluntary thing. Like if you're angry with someone and they've really annoyed you and you want to hit them, that's not what it is. It's a complete loss of the faculty of control. And you just don't know what to do and you just have to let it run its course. I've been doing some reading about meltdowns this week, and some of the techniques that people have suggested, if you're in a public space or if you're in a business environment and you have a meltdown, you really want to have someone with you who understands that you're having a meltdown and how they can help. And the way to help is to try and move other people away, so you don't have onlookers looking on and gawking and staring. Try and move other people away. If you think some of the stimulation might have been bright lights or loud noise, then try and reduce that by turning things down and finding somewhere quiet. If it's at all possible to say, why don't you just sit down? They may not respond to you at all, but they may, at some level, they might recognize that you're there but not respond. But if you speak very calmly, very gently, and say, would you like to sit down? Can I get you a drink of water? Something like that, just to try and ease the situation. And if it, and it can be very very disarming for someone, or sorry, very alarming for someone to have a meltdown. I recall one that I had where I had literally just lost it. I was in no control over what I was saying, what I was doing, and my poor wife just didn't know what to do. And she did the right thing, but actually just leave me alone was actually one of the best things that can happen with me. Just if I'm having a meltdown, just leave me alone, walk out the room, and that can take some of the tension out, some of the heat out of the situation, and then I can gradually, slowly calm down, start to put rational thought together, start to realize what has gone on, and try and get back to normal, and do something very simple, very basic, like have a drink of water, or make a cup of tea, and just sit down and be calm, and just find whatever it is that works for you to take the heat out of a situation, and just allow yourself to be. Don't worry about it. There's no point worrying about having a meltdown. If it's happened, it's happened. You just have to let it take its course and try and take yourself away from the environment, or have the environment taken away from you by asking people to leave and turning the things down. And it's a horrible sensation. You almost feel like, certainly when I had one, I almost felt like I was watching myself from a disassociated state, as though I was watching this lunatic, this madman that was me, shouting and swearing and being aggressive. And it was as though I was sitting sort of looking down on this scenario that was going on. And it was very disconcerting. It really was disconcerting. But eventually I did calm down. And once I was able to calm down and speak normally, we could have a conversation about it. Find out what the trigger was. It may have been something my wife said. It may have just been pressure build up from things that had happened throughout the day or the last 2 or 3 days. And somewhere, something inside just snapped, and I wasn't able to function in a controlled way. And it was difficult. It was very unpleasant for my wife to witness it, because she was on the blunt end of whatever I was shouting and swearing and being very unkind about. And eventually we just managed to to calm me down. And I think she actually, I think she, because she knows me very well, I think she challenged me by saying something, and I can't remember what it was, but I think she got close enough to challenge me by saying something to try and get my attention away from what was happening and try and focus on what she was saying, and that she was there. And I think that's what worked for me, was having a distraction from the meltdown to take me out of it into a more calm and more natural state. I think one of the things to say about meltdowns is they are completely involuntary. Completely involuntary. You have no control over them. And it's not like a toddler having a tantrum. A toddler having a tantrum is a completely voluntary thing. They have decided they're having a tantrum because they're not getting what they want from their parents or their siblings, and they have just decided they're going to have a strop right there and then because they can't have their toy, or they can't have an ice cream, or whatever it was. A meltdown is not that. A meltdown is completely involuntary. You have no control over it, and you just have to let it take its course. I say that the things that you can do: remove yourself from the situation, ask others to remove themselves from the situation, until you can eventually calm down. But it's not a pleasant thing. And I was just wondering whether you've experienced a meltdown, or whether you've had a meltdown, or whether you felt yourself getting to the point of, if I can't get out of here somehow, some way, I'm not going to be in control of what happens.
I think it's a sort of a sensation of being overwhelmed, isn't it?
Yes.
A sense in your senses, and being unable to process what's going around. I remember when I was a teenager, I used to sometimes, well, if I felt overwhelmed, I used to walk around and around the garden, or around the house, or around a tree or something like that. And I remember once I brought a girlfriend home for the day to visit my parents, and we were doing some gardening, and I can't remember what happened now, but I found myself just walking. I left. I was walking down the drive, and my mum said, overheard my mum saying to my girlfriend, she said, "Never mind. When he gets like that, my advice to you is just leave him alone, and he'll
Yes.
he'll come back."
That is probably 99% of the times. That's probably the best strategy, is to leave them alone.
But you can have that sense of being overwhelmed in situations where, especially when there's a lot of change, or when things happen which are very maybe with too much change and too maybe disorganized, for you to understand and be able to adapt. I remember one particular event here, which my colleague DK remembers. We had a visit from the Ministry of Agriculture, and I'd been working on a subject for some weeks. I knew everything about a law which I had been following, which I understood was correct. And they were saying was incorrect, that I was, it was about a product, an organically proved product that I was using, and they said, and I had every reason why, and I had discussed that with a number of people who agreed with the reason why. And so I'd worked a lot on this for a week or 2 weeks beforehand. I built up a whole file on the subject, and I wanted to talk about it to them. I understood there was about 2 people coming, and there ended up to about 7 people coming and they wanted to visit the farm, and they wanted to do what they wanted to do. And I had everything planned out to the minute. And I found myself in the end, I can't remember, I was shouting at them or not, but being very sarcastic with them, upset with them, and they gave me a form as well to fill. They wanted me to sign it then and there, about having an audit, having this visit. And in the end, we went out to the visit farm. I remember that I went out in one car with DK with me, and he was saying, "You have to behave yourself." And then when we got to the farm, we met up with the same chap again who I'd been arguing with, and I couldn't stop talking about this one subject. In the end, he was saying, we can make your company's life very difficult if you continue talking about the subject. And I couldn't stop talking. about the one subject, because I knew I was right, and I wanted, and because there was so much change, so much that seemed very subjective in what they wanted to do. They wanted to come, I think, for a sort of jolly, to walk around and visit, and it was the feeling of being overwhelmed and unable to almost like it's like you have a feeling that you want to escape into a dark room and just completely close yourself off.
Yes. Yeah, completely.
But that was probably a major event. Other times that I find that if I'm overwhelmed with a situation, I can, well, at that point I didn't realize that I had ASD anyway, so that was then. But with the sort of knowledge of that sort of thing, you can make adaptations or leave the environment you're in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes I wish I didn't. For example, if I'm in a group and the discussion seems to be going on and on, and it seems very almost disorganized, and I have this feeling that I don't want to listen anymore. I just want to escape. You have the same sort of feeling, but then you can sort of work with it.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
I
completely understand that sense of it wasn't the fact that you were being challenged for the sake of being challenged, but it was they sounded like they were just kept coming at you, and there were 7 of them, and you couldn't focus and concentrate, and they weren't listening. And sometimes I get incredibly frustrated when someone doesn't listen to what I'm saying, and I can really I really can get quite agitated about that when I think I'm explaining something quite clearly, quite succinctly, with you know, standard English, and they're just not getting it, or they're deliberately not getting it, and that sense of frustration can boil up into overwhelm. And I can remember times like that at work where I know one particular site I was working on. There was a big team of about 60 people supervising this motorway job, and we were incredibly pushed. We were really under the knuckle for the amount of work we had, and they wanted me to do something else. They wanted me to do something more, and I had enough. I'd had enough, and so I got a sheet. I got a spreadsheet, and I just made little tabs of all the tasks to do and how long it would take me to do it. And I prepared, it's like a little program of all the tasks, how long I think it would take, what support I had from the other team members. And I was going to go into the meeting and explain to him, look, I can't do this because I've got 3 weeks work to do in 2 weeks for this task. I'm overwhelmed with this task. I'm not getting any support for this task. It just can't be squeezed in. We either need to drop some of the tasks, or you need to get me some more resources. And so we went into this meeting with all the senior staff to resolve this issue. And as I walked in, I was sitting down. Then my boss walked in and he saw this sheet of paper I had, and he said, "You can put that damn thing away for a start." And I just lost it. I thought, stuff this. I said, "Do what the hell you like. I don't care." And I stormed out of the room, back into my office, slammed the door behind me, locked the door with me inside. And I thought, if anyone's going to come through that door, I just don't know what's going to happen. And I was absolutely fuming. I was trying so hard to do all the things that we had to do without the resources. And that flippant remark that you get, I just lost it. I thought, it wasn't a meltdown, but it was a complete frustration moment of overwhelm, where I can't deal with it. You decide what you're going to do, then you tell me what you want me to do, and I'll do that. And if something else doesn't get done, then it doesn't get done. And if you want me to write you memos about it, I'll be delighted to do that. And I just completely lost it. I thought there was no way I could then sit in that meeting and have a rational conversation with 4 or 5 different people, all pulling at me in different directions to try and say, I need you to do this and I need you to do that. And I just couldn't cope with that at all, and slammed my door. And I think it must have been 15, 20 minutes. And then there was a very gentle tap on my door, and it was one of my team. "Andrew, are you okay?" And there was this very gentle voice from the other side of it. And I think so. Is he there? as knowing exactly who it was I was referring to. And he said, no, he's not here. He's gone back to his office. Okay, so I opened the door and came out and went and had a cup of tea. And I then went and sat in her office, so that I was out of my little micro environment. I went and sat in her office. And we just talked about nothing, nothing to do with the job. We just sat and talked about stuff, personal stuff, just so that I could calm down and get back to normal mode. And sure enough, the next day I got a list of things to do and what to do, and some things got dropped and some things didn't, and that was it. But it was just that sense of not having any control, being overwhelmed, and having someone with the audacity to say, well, you can put that away, it just was not, it was a red rag to a bull. It was just not the right thing to say. And it was very difficult. You know, I could have, if I'd have bitten, it would have been a full-on slagging match, and it would have probably got physical, and it would have been very nasty. And I thought, I've got to get out of here. I just got to get out of here. So I went and sat in my office, locked the door behind me. But it's so difficult when you get to that point of being able to make that rational step of, I've got to get out of here. I've got to do something else, rather than stay and suffer and have a meltdown, and whatever gets said and done is then going to be used as ammunition against you because you were unreasonable and things like that. And it's a very difficult thing. It's a very difficult thing to try and cope with. And I agree with what you said, Damien, about just walking away and you know, trying to find some way of being calm and relaxed about it. But it's not easy when you get to that boiling point. And there's actually an interesting thing that I read when I was doing some research about it. Someone referred to something called the rumble stage, which is that point where you still have some semblance of control of what's going on, but you're gradually, it's like the pot of water is starting to boil and it's rumbling, and just before it gets to that point, there are triggers and there are signs that other people might be able to notice, you know, colleagues around you and things like that might be able to notice, hang on, I can sense something's going to happen here. Let's try and diffuse the situation. Let's take the situation, either take the situation away from Andrew, or take Andrew away from the situation. And sometimes that can help with people if others around you, work colleagues, can recognize the rumble points and the triggers, they might be able to help by just alleviating the problem, taking the stimulus away from the situation. But it requires people around you to understand you, and know that you're not just being difficult for the sake of being difficult. You're actually going into an emotional state that you can't control, and that's quite hard to
Is that the same as when you, like, for instance, even if you're, say, in a group of a lot of people talking about a lot of different things, and you have a sensation that as I have to get out of here to be, you know, on my own for a little bit, not necessarily meltdown, but that feeling that you have of needing to escape. Would you say that's the same?
yes,
That can be created by large crowds or situations where you have the sensation you need to get out of there. You know, that situation.
Yeah, I do. I do. And I think it's environmental factors of all sorts of things. It might be, you might be sitting at your desk, there might be something happening, someone's having an argument in one part of the office and some people are talking loudly on the phone, and something else has happened, and things are just starting to creep up on you. They're starting to agitate your state of mind. And that's the point where you think, I've got to get away, I've got to get out, go and have a walk. And I remember in one place that I worked, when things weren't going well, I would actually find myself, and I genuinely didn't know how I got there, but I would find myself on a different floor of the building that I worked in the stationery office. Don't know why I used to find myself in the stationery office, but I found that if I was there, the chap who was there, who was dishing out stationery, was a lovely chap. He would quite happily talk to you about all sorts of things, but it wasn't anything work related. So it was away from the atmosphere, and we would talk about things, and I'll get some stationery and I'll go back. And there would be other times that I would I would realize I was on a different place in the building and I didn't know how I got there. I had obviously got up from my desk and walked to this place, or I was on the way to somewhere, but I'd find myself stopped in the middle of a corridor going, where am I and why am I here? And it would take me a good few seconds to realize, hang on, I'm on the 4th floor, or I'm on the 5th floor, or I'm not supposed to be here. Where am I going? Was I going somewhere with a purpose and I haven't got there? Or was I just escaping the environment that I was in and I just had to get away? And this is where I found myself when I realized I wasn't where I should be. And that had happened to me quite a few times, and finding myself in strange places in the building that I worked would happen quite often when I was stressed to the point of not being able to cope. Yeah. And I think had someone come up to me and said, what the hell are you doing here, and been quite abrupt with me, I don't know what would have happened. I could have completely gone, rather than, oh, hello, what are you doing here? Can I help? That might have helped me, because that might have shook me out of this sort of state, and I might have started to get my senses back together and my reality back together. But that sort of moment, depending on who it was and how it was said, could trigger me one way. Could either calm me down, relax me, and help me realize, oh, actually, I'm not supposed to be here. Or it could be, what are you doing here? You shouldn't be here. That would have triggered the opposite reaction. And very difficult it's very difficult to try to explain that you can find yourself in a building that you work on a different floor with no apparent reason for why you're there. And people would, when I did say to some people sometimes that I did this, they would look at me and think I was completely nuts. But that was my way of coping, was just to get out of that situation, was find a way out, find a way of being calmer. And occasionally I would just leave the building and go and stand in the car park, or walk around the car park for 5 or 10 minutes, and then come back into the building. And that reframing, that calming down would help me then refocus to be able to get on and do some work. But it's a very difficult thing to explain to others who don't, or haven't seen one, or don't have an ASD, how they cope with that sort of situation.
I'm lucky in my work in that I can escape out into the fields sometimes and be by myself, and sometimes I will look around at the crops as a way to simply to get away from either office or so I have a good tool there that I can use if I'm stressed. But for me, sometimes it's either everything's going really well or I want to destroy everything.
Yes. Yes.
So, two modes, but
yes.
So
yeah. But, if I say something about Damian, it can say something about Damian behave to you.
Yes, you can.
Yes, go on.
Yeah. No, I found that Damian get very irritated when you interrupt him when he's talking, because he has to start and finish what he wants to say, and you cannot even say really, or can you repeat that? Or, well, I didn't understand this part. No, you have to wait until he finish, and then you can ask the question. It's something amazing, because he always gets very, very upset when I try to show that I am understanding him. I want to ask for doubts about what he said, but no, you cannot. You have to wait, and if it's 10 minutes, you forget all your question, obviously, because he doesn't let me interrupt him. And he get sometimes he get aggressive when you interrupt him. And what I have found always that he, maybe because it's not something voluntary, what's happened, he never asks for, he never says sorry. After I know him, and it doesn't matter for me, but I find very said, well, he didn't realize that he has been very rude. He didn't realize that he has been, well, we can say something.
Well, I don't realize I can't say
sorry, I'm talking. That's his excuse, I think. But he never says sorry. I know, well, because I know him, but it put me nervous when he act as a nonsense chap, and then nothing has happened. I said, he didn't realize that it hurts me or that I'm annoying. No, he never. And you said that you didn't say that you apologize with your boss, did you? So possibly it's something common that when you think it's not your fault, you don't ask for say sorry. You don't know. It's something that can, I don't know. What do you think?
I understand that, and I'm sure if you were to speak to my wife or other people who know me, they might say something similar. I absolutely hate, with a vengeance, being interrupted when I'm talking. I absolutely hate it, and I can get really quite agitated, particularly if I'm on the phone to someone in authority. If I'm trying to deal with someone from the council about something or something like that, and they just don't listen to what I'm telling them. I mean, I speak pretty good English. I mean, I wouldn't say I don't make literal sense of in the words that I use, but when they then talk over me and interrupt me, that really agitates me, and it gets me really annoyed very quickly. And I do say things like, please don't interrupt me, it's annoying and it's rude, and I will then carry on. And if they do it again, I really struggle with that. And that's partly because of having an ASD, but it's also partly because of the way I was brought up. My parents were very strict in about having good manners, and I don't think there was anything wrong with that. But you didn't interrupt people when they were talking, and you said your pleases and thank yous and all of those things. And that was ingrained into me from a very early age, that you should be polite and shouldn't interrupt people. So when people do it to me, I really take umbrage with that, and I get really annoyed very quickly. And my tone, my wife, sometimes my wife will come upstairs and go, and she looks in the door, and I'll look around, and she'll sort of mouth, is someone annoying you on the phone? And because she can tell from my tone of voice changes. No, and she recognizes that trigger that someone is on the other end of the phone who is annoying me or is interrupting me or talking over me, and she recognizes that. I recognize it as well, but I still can't stop myself from getting annoyed about it.
Normally Damien never say sorry, I am talking. He just say, fuck off, can you shut up, or something like that, always.
Yeah, because I mean, for me, it's either I am.
He gets annoyed very quick. Very quick. He has no time to say please. No.
Attack. My natural instinct is attack always. But I'll say one thing now. Sorry.
Get a sign made up above your door. but recognizing the triggers of someone's meltdowns is actually quite an important thing in the workplace. So if you know someone who you work with who's on the spectrum, and you've got to know them quite well, then you can recognize their triggers, and you can recognize environmental signs yourself and think, hang on, this might not be very good for Andrew or that person. And you can sense that there might be an issue coming up, and you might be able to help them by asking other people to be quiet, or if you want to take that conversation somewhere else so that we don't disrupt the whole office. Because open plan offices, I used to work in open plan offices with like 20-30 people, and the bombardment of noise when there's 3 or 4 of them on the phone, or there's 2 or 3 of them having 2 or 3 different conversations, this incessant noise was quite annoying. We've just got someone else joined us, so I'll say hello in a minute. So, but those kind of things help people a lot if you recognize the triggers that someone might have, or in your environment that you're working, so that you can diffuse a situation before it starts. I'll just say hello to Sam. Hi, Sam.
Hi, sorry I'm horrendously late.
That's okay.
The client session ran over.
That's quite all right. It's good to see you. We're talking about meltdowns, actually.
Oh.
And we were just having a good discussion about the what can happen in the rumbling stage before a meltdown occurs. And we were just talking about environmental factors like people interrupting me, but both Damien and I were talking about, when we're talking, we like to say what we have to say without being interrupted. And I get very agitated very quickly, particularly with people in authority, like the council or whatever. I get very quickly when someone starts talking over me, because I was brought up, my life experience, my environmental triggers and my environmental situation. You don't be rude, don't interrupt people. And so that's part of my upbringing, it's part of my makeup. So we were talking about meltdowns in that sort of context. So have you had any experience of meltdowns?
Yeah, so I experienced that kind of frustration in childhood because all of my family talk all the time. So getting a word in is challenging, and holding on to that space is even harder because as soon as you take a breath, someone's stolen that moment from you. So I then perpetuated that as an adult to other people, where I'd wait for them to breathe and then I'd be in there because that's my only chance. So I had to do some CBT on myself to learn that I don't have to do that with everyone else because they're not my family. Yeah. And that helped to reduce my anxiety levels significantly in the workspace, which obviously contributes massively to meltdowns, I find.
Yes.
Having that heightened anxiety, and then other things happen and it pushes you over the edge.
Yeah.
And a way I describe it to others who haven't experienced it themselves or find it hard to articulate is, if you imagine a graph where you've got kind of 0 to 10 as in a score, and then you've got time across the bottom, and most people who are neurotypical are probably on like a 3 or 4 out of 10, with the odd spike, money worries, a death in the family, things like that. But the spike doesn't tend to go up above 10, so they don't get into meltdown or breakdown or whatever. It only really happens when multiple things happen at the same time and they haven't got the bandwidth to cope. And then they tend to have what's called a nervous breakdown, and then they take time off from work, and that's completely acceptable. Whereas a neurodiverse person, a neurodivergent person, is operating at an 8 or 9 out of 10 every day, all day. And quite often it doesn't take a lot to push us out into meltdown or breakdown or whatever you want to call it. For some people, it's a shutdown. And that might happen 15 times in one day for somebody, depending on what their life is like. And they won't get any kind of empathy or sympathy from people they work with because it happens a lot. And that's really challenging when you feel like you've got no support and there's nothing you can do about how you're responding to the world, because they won't even meet you halfway, never mind anything else. And the amount of times I've suggested that organisations have like a punch bag in the stairwell or something, because often, especially in IT, you get super frustrated. And in corporate, you're not encouraged to express any kind of big emotions at all. That's a big frown. No crying, no laughing out loud, no expression of anger. Thank you very much. And don't be opinionated or anything like that. Everything has to be very vanilla, which is very frustrating when you feel the world in a big way and you have to try and minimize yourself. And that effort of minimizing myself, plus the anxiety of everything anyway, it wouldn't take much at all to push me over the edge.
Yeah, and the issue with that is, if someone is watching that, they will then say, "Oh, but it was only a little thing," and you had a completely disproportionate response to it. And you're then criticised for, "It was only something little. It was only someone come up last."
Reaction.
Exactly, and then you're the bad guy, when actually, as you say, you're sitting at 90 degrees and the pot's starting to simmer, and it's not going to take much to push you over the edge. Completely get that. Yeah.
But also in the moment of meltdown, people who don't understand will try to get you to explain what's going wrong. What's wrong with you? And for me, I know my version of meltdown, it can either be shut down or meltdown. So shut down, I'm mute.
Yes.
They call it selective mutism, which is so ironic because I didn't select it at all. It happens to me. And being so chatty, it's really obvious because I stop talking completely and withdraw. And they're like, "Oh, what's wrong with you? Sam, what's wrong with you?" "Oh, there's something wrong with Sam." It's like the medical emergency. No, I'm just
Crash cart.
I'm rebooting. I had the blue screen of death. Go away, leave me alone. And occasionally with meltdown, I've learned I have to take myself out of the situation immediately, because
Yes.
I can't cope with the questions.
I will
So
sometimes walk off halfway through a conversation if it's
Yeah.
getting too
Yeah.
much.
And
Particularly,
yeah, people don't understand. They think you're being rude when actually they don't realize you were going to punch them.
Yes. The alternative for me, by me staying, is not an alternative you want to see. Let me get away. I need to get away. Let me go away. Even if it's just walking around the car park for 10 minutes. Or
yes,
I was just, yeah. Go on, Damien.
I have one other example, nothing against you, Sam, but sometimes if I've organised a meeting or visitors and they arrive late to the office, the time between when I thought they were supposed to be there, the time they actually arrive, it's going round in my head. And I've had times when they turned up, I've immediately started having a real go at them.
Well,
Because it sort of goes round and round and round in my head. It's supposed to happen at 4 o'clock and then it doesn't. So it's for me, it doesn't matter that it was them or anything. It was supposed to happen this way and it didn't happen that way. And so it just sort of
And you got stuck in a loop.
It goes round and round until I find almost everything's cloudy around me. And I have to sort of hit out or it's or escape. Sometimes a bit of humor can help deflate a situation, but it's
I agree. One of the things I have with that is if I do use humor at that point, it can be very caustic. And it's not very gentle humor. It's not a Jack and Jill joke. And that I struggle with. And the other one, of course, is exactly what Damien said. Is no disrespect to you, Sam, because I understand. is I absolutely detest with an iron will people being late. I absolutely hate it. It's drummed into me from tiniest baby, drummed my earliest memories. You shall not be late for anything. I would rather be an hour early than 1 minute late. And I would quite happily, if I'm an hour early, go and find a coffee shop, find how long it takes to get from the coffee shop to where I'm going, go and find a coffee shop, sit there for 40 minutes, and then be standing outside for 15 minutes waiting for them to let me in. That would be me, rather than being 1 minute late. I cannot deal with late.
Yes, ironically, I'm not great with late either. But equally, I'm not great with really early. So
okay.
In my head, there's like a 5-minute window either side of the time. So say we agreed to get together at 3 o'clock, like we kind of did. Had I not had a client crying in front of me, which felt like the wrong moment to go, sorry, I've got another meeting to go to, I would have been here on time. But usually, if someone is coming to me and they like turn up half an hour early, I'm all discombobulated because I'd already planned the 25 minutes leading up to the 5 minutes before for what I'm doing.
Yes.
So if you turn up early, you're now in the space that I didn't expect you to be in, and I've got to do something with you. And when it was in a corporate setting, I would, if someone came in at like a reception and they'd be like, your visitor's here, and I'd be like, okay, can you give them a cup of tea or something? I'll be down in 25 minutes. And I would think that was perfectly acceptable to leave them there for 25 minutes because it's not my fault they're early. Apparently you're not supposed to do that. Apparently if they're early, you're supposed to just go and get them.
Yeah, I find the same thing. If people are early, it's the same. I've had people walk into the office 10 minutes early and someone said, oh, your visitors arrived. And I'll say to someone, no, it's at 4 o'clock, or no, it's at they haven't, so I'll go into my office.
I will usually find somewhere to be so that I'm not at that point. So I'd find the coffee shop or stand around the corner so that I would turn up 5 or 10 minutes early to do the to do the reception thing. But but because if I'm going to a meeting or there's a meeting coming to me, that 25 minutes, that half an hour beforehand, that's me revising through my prep. It's going through my notes. It's reading through the last minute's meeting notes if there were.
Your state
it's getting in the
subject.
It's getting into the zone for that, so that when I'm there, I am fully engaged with all the information, knowing what's going on, what's happened, what my list of things I want to cover are, what my topics are, what was the big topic that someone else had, and I'm all ready and I'm happy. So that I have my prep time as well, which is what I was doing at 2:30 my 2:30 to 10 to 3 was me just reading through my notes again about meltdowns. So it's all good. Yeah.
And I bet you would have loved it if you'd have got a phone call during that time. That would have been wizard, wouldn't it?
I turn my phone off 20 minutes before before the meetings. If I'm doing a live call, I turn my phone off 20 minutes before.
Yeah. When I'm organising events, because I'm in Toastmasters, so we do like an event every couple of weeks, and I will say to people in a pre-email really clearly, please do not message me before, you know, or after this time, because I will not be checking my emails or my messages because I'm prepping for the meeting, because it's a hybrid meeting and I do all the tech for it. So I'm not looking at my phone at all. And I will get emails and messages during that time when I said don't send me email and messages every single time.
I occasionally I like trawling through Facebook to find 30 times bosses went completely over the top with stuff and all those things, because there's some wonderful material in there, in those sorts of the Poke and Metro and things like that. And there was one where this chap, and he made a mistake, and I'll tell you what the mistake was in a minute. He gets a text from his boss saying, I need this immediately, it's urgent, I'm desperate, gotta do it, can you get on with it right now? What the chap who got the text should have done is ignored it, because it was 3 o'clock in the morning from his boss. And he responded. He made the mistake of responding. And then there's this chain of emails going backwards and forwards between the poor employee at 3 o'clock in the morning in his bed and his boss. And eventually the employee just says, I'll see you in the morning. And boss is like, okay, whatever. And it's now made as though it's the employee's fault that the boss couldn't organize himself and was texting at 3 o'clock in the morning. There was another situation, and I'm conscious of time. There was another situation where someone got phoned on his personal phone after work hours, and his boss says, I've tried to phone you on your work phone, but it's turned off. And the employee said, yes, that's right, it's after work hours. You've gave me the phone to work during work hours. If you want me to be on call, then you need to change your terms and conditions and pay me more. Which I thought was a brilliant response. This phone is for work. I finished work, it's off. And he turns it off. Brilliant.
I had a boss that didn't sleep much, and he would phone me through the night whenever he felt like it. I ended up putting my phone on silent, obviously. So then he would leave me long, wordy voicemails about what he wanted me to do when I woke up and stuff like that. And I'd spent 4 hours arranging back-to-back calls or meetings in London, and then he'd go 7 o'clock in the morning or something. He'd ring and he'd go, "Yeah, can you clear my diary? I'm not going to London anymore." So if I've got that message and I'm asleep or was asleep, or I'm still at home, or I'm not, not yet ready to go to work, I can't just ignore it. My brain's instantly going into, oh God, I've got to rearrange all those meetings and all those people who are waiting for him in London. So I can't wait. I need to tell at least the first person he's not coming. So he's forced me to start work at 7 potentially. When I'm not even in the office, I'm not even out of bed.
Yeah.
That's the trouble. Once you start,
that's it. Once you start, you've given them tacit permission to do that all the time. And these are the things that trigger people into meltdowns, because it's things outside your control, environmental factors of people, poor communication, or noise, or bright lights, or textures of things, someone squeaky, someone rubbing their feet on the carpet and it making a noise, or you get static electricity or clicking pens. Exactly. All of these people whistling
in the office for me is terrible.
I used to whistle.
No, it's not him, it's another comes in whistling. But just on a triggering note, I can feel my stress level rise now, because I book this time off every week. I book an hour off and I've told every single person that I am in a meeting at 4 to 4:30. I start work at 6 in the morning and work until say 6 p.m. And on a Wednesday, just for half an hour or 1 hour, I book that time off. And I've had one meeting booked for 4 p.m. and my boss has just been calling on the mobile. So
I think it's kind of insulting that they're so inconsiderate, I think.
Yes.
Because if you did that to the boss, how would they feel about that?
Yeah, he
It's like
normally
they're
doesn't
treating
answer
you.
if he's not away or something. He probably wouldn't answer.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm becoming less and less employable, that's for sure. Because if I went back into corporate now, I'd have so many boundaries. They wouldn't really like me very much.
Yes, when they ask the question, how can we support you in your work? And you produce a 5-page document.
Yes, I printed this off earlier.
Exactly.
List of rules.
Yes, this is what you can and can't. This is how you should communicate with me to get the best out of me, of course.
Absolutely. This is my preference for working. I don't want to be near a security door, a kitchenette, or a photocopier.
Nothing with smells, no near the canteen. If the door's got a squeak on it, get maintenance to come and oil it.
Absolutely.
Anyway, I'm going to have to wrap us up now because we have talked at length about meltdowns. I think what we might do another time is have a talk about shutdowns, because Sam has mentioned it, and I used to get shutdowns as a kid at school. But
maybe another thing is, how in terms of how colleagues can help, and I can invite Geeky again. A general, coping with colleagues. It might be a subject there for 1 week.
Yep.
But
yeah, that sounds good.
Good idea.
Because some people want help, but they can't ask for it in the moment. So it's something you set up. And some people are like, don't go anywhere near me, don't talk to me, don't touch me, leave me alone. And again, it's hard to do in the moment. You have to tell them in advance, if you see me doing this, just leave me to it and I'll be fine in 10 minutes.
I would like to have a writing list saying from Damien, if you see me saying that, do that. If you were, and then I can study that, and that is simple and easy for me.
I think we all should have a 10-point rules of engagement and communication stuck behind our desk on the wall. If you see this, do this. If you see that, do that. If I'm doing this, run.
Well, people ask us what kind of drink we like to drink, don't they? They say, do you like tea, coffee? How do you like your coffee? But they don't ask us how we like to communicate.
No.
Sometimes number one is don't.
Completely agree. So we've had a fascinating discussion on meltdowns, causes of meltdowns, environmental factors, and what you can do as a colleague to try and recognize that someone might be going there and try and help diffuse the situation, or suggest they go for a walk, or try and take the environment away from them as well as them out of the environment. So all these techniques are ways to help the person who has an autism spectrum disorder. It's not to be picky, and it's not to be judgmental, but if you've seen someone have a meltdown, or you have had a meltdown yourself, then you will do all that you think you can to avoid that happening to someone else, because it's not very nice. And it doesn't serve anyone's purpose to allow it to happen if you think you can step in with a simple strategy, a simple thing you can do to try and diffuse a situation. So that is all we have time for today. We have talked a great conversation about meltdowns. Thank you very much, Damien and Geeky and Sam, for joining us. So I'm going to hit the record off.